So good morning, everybody. It's morning here, and I wanted to introduce you. This year, what we're going to try to do is tape the usual segments that we would offer in teacher trainings, our favorites, the ones that you all enjoy the most. And then we're going to offer them to you online or virtually so that you can see them at your leisure and not miss that opportunity this year. This year, as we know, this year's theme is diplomacy and debate. Boy, is that timely and boy, is that necessary. And we have two of our favorite all-time people who are here to help you understand how to use the Library of Congress. I've said it many a time, and I believe this to be true, that you can do an entire History Day project using Teaching with Primary Sources and the Library of Congress. And our two experts about that, in that, are with us. So guys, everybody welcome Kyle and Keith. They are the TPS kings in my world, and I'm going to turn it over to them and let them teach you everything you need to know about using those resources.
All right, can you all hear me? The audio is slow. I think everything's fine now. If I get a confirmation that it isn't working out okay.
You're good.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Patterson, and just give me a second while I share my screen here for you. And just like to welcome you all. My name is Keith Patterson. I am the Associate Director of the Teaching with Primary Sources Western Region. We are based out of Metropolitan State University in Denver. And with me is Kyle. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hey, my name is Kyle Kleba. I'm the project coordinator for Teaching with Primary Sources Western Region. I also teach in the journalism department at MSU Denver.
So we'd like to welcome you, and it's a pleasure for us to be able to sit down and speak with you today. The work we do with the Teaching with Primary Sources program, which I'll talk about a little bit in a minute, really does dovetail nicely with the NHT program. And so it's always a pleasure to be able to show a little bit about the resources that are helpful to learners in the NHT program. So our contact information is there. We'll share that again at the end if you want to grab it. I'm sure it'll be accompanying with this video as well. If you get a hold of us, we're happy to help with these sorts of things. That's what we're here for. As I mentioned, just to kind of just to give us a foundation of who we are and why we're here and how we help the NHT program. We work with the Teaching with Primary Sources program, which is a grant program from the Library of Congress. And our overall mission is, I usually say, is in two major steps. And one is we're just to raise awareness of the educational resources that are available online at the Library of Congress website, loc.gov. That's the big thing. And then the second part of that is the teaching part, is effective use of that material in a teaching or educational setting. Pretty broad range of things we can do with that, but obviously talking about history education and research like we're going to be talking about today with NHT is fits right very well with the materials that are the millions of things that are digitized and available on the Library of Congress website that belong to all of us as United States citizens, and then effectively using those in projects like NHT. So we'll delve into that a little bit more, but that's kind of where we sit as a foundation. We have a bit.ly link there. Might be a good time to grab that or find the link that's provided along with this video. That has access to this presentation, and this is all annotated in the notes of the Google slide. So everything I've got here is linked out so you can find it later. So I know it's kind of frustrating as I buzz through a massive site like the Library of Congress not to have those links all available. So that's available in this slide. And I also have an accompanying but just some notes that I have for all the places I'm going to go today that kind of walk you through the tour I'm giving, which hopefully that'll be helpful for you and your students as you share this resource with them. And like it says there, really the foundation of what we're going to be talking about specifically in this is really getting started with research for NHT projects, for national history projects at the loc.gov website. As a foundation, our program, as I mentioned, really we're talking about the effective use of these resources and primary sources that are at the Library of Congress. We like to use this information about really the need for historical thinking and just information literacy skills. And as denoted by this, obviously, as history students, you might start doing a primary source analysis of that image there, and noticing that maybe some of it's a primary source and some of it is a bit of an alteration of an image. But it really gets down to the crux of this information that was provided by the Stanford History Education Group about how students, from the beginning all the way up into college, struggle to process information in the digital age that we're in. And we really do feel that information literacy and the skills that that we profess as teaching with primary sources in the NHD program really build into students are foundational skills that are good skills for being informationally literate, and as well as just being good citizens as well. So that's really what this is about, and just kind of giving a shout out to the skills that are built through the NHD program, and that dovetail nicely with what we're trying to do with the Teaching with Primary Sources program. As a foundation, in case you're not aware of what the Library of Congress is, the Library of Congress is the nation's library, and it was founded originally in 1800, at the very beginning of our country, as an acknowledgement that information was going to be important for our democracy, and that was an important thing from the get-go, pretty much. And so they were to provide a library of information to Congress to make sure that they had all the information they needed to make good decisions and laws. During the War of 1812, that was burned down in the Capitol. It was originally housed in the Capitol in 1815. They reestablished that by purchasing about 6,500 books from Thomas Jefferson. That collection still stands and is in display at the Jefferson Building. So if you're ever out in Washington, D.C., you can actually visit Thomas Jefferson's library. That was the original books in the new in quotes Library of Congress, which is always a fun thing to see the breadth of knowledge that was donated by Thomas Jefferson to start that out. Of course, it's grown tremendously since then, and so now there's over 170 million items, well more than that actually now, that really cover the gamut of different kinds of information. People think books when they think library, but really the Library of Congress and its online collections really are dedicated to collecting all sorts of stuff, manuscripts, books, visual material, all these things, sheet music, maps, 3D objects. And now the digital collections that you can access online for free are well over 60 million things that are available out there. And these are just rife, ready for use for your students and their ADHD projects. Pretty much you're going to find something that they can use in any project. Or as Celeste mentioned, build an entire project around it if you're in the right area. So it's ready there, free and ready to use, and vetted, and tons of great backup information and corroboration with that information that we're looking for NHD projects. So it's a good place to start research, expand research, and just learn more about the topic that you're looking at doing. Just as an overview, so the Library of Congress is not really, LFC.gov is a website, but it's kind of not just a website. It's a home or an umbrella for all of the things that the Library of Congress does. And this is kind of just a sampling. This is not everything, but these are kind of the major areas that we'll talk about. We're not going to talk about all of these today, but just wanted to make you aware that these are all things that the Library of Congress takes on their website. And you'll see it handles everything from congress.gov, which is actually a housing of congressional records that's updated constantly, that will tell you what's going on with Congress right now. And you can track bills and get information about how government works there, to historic newspapers at the Chronicle of America collection, Folklife Center. The Copyright Office is housed at the Library of Congress, and so they handle all the copyrighting of books. Obviously, this says they're putting things online. There's digital preservation and digital collections. The law library is there for people who are doing legal research, which could be very interesting for some topics. Obviously, out of that second column there, we have the teachers page, which is kind of where we're born out of, and the educational outreach stuff that the library is doing. Blind and print stuff for the disabled, they provide that. There's all sorts of online exhibits, and on and on and on and on and on. We'll touch on a good number of these, but not all of them, but just be aware that Library of Congress is kind of is an information clearinghouse that we all can access online. So I just wanted to reiterate that for everybody. So I just wanted to touch a little bit, as Celeste mentioned, the theme this year is debate in diplomacy and history. As history themes usually are, they're open and can offer a lot of avenues for research and exploration and learning. But the Library of Congress has a lot of great inroads in that, and I just love seeing that theme. And I have some some ideas about some projects and ideas that you might be able to do as we do a little tour here in just a second. I did want to point out that one of our partners, Citizen U out of the Barra Institute, every year always goes through, as soon as they hear the theme, and they go through and do an exhaustive kind of clearing of ideas and blog posts about the theme. And so rather than me give you an exhaustive list, I'm just going to steal from them, and that's linked there. You can click through if you grab a copy of the presentation. I think they have 3 write-ups, and they may add some more, but there's some great information ideas that can be shared with your students, and then some launching points to do some research at the Library of Congress and other places as well. But they always do a really nice job with that. So I would recommend taking a look at that to prime yourself on the topic a little bit, and as well as share that with your students or anybody else who's interested in that. So I just like to share that before we get going too far, just kind of give you a shortcut on some research. So next, I'm actually going to hop over to the actual Library of Congress website, and we're going to take a look at the actual website and some launching points for research. So let me hop over when everything's working correctly. Hopefully you all can see that we are now at the Library of Congress website, loc.gov. And as you're seeing here, at the top, as most websites do now, they have a nice pretty slider with all these pictures that talk about some of the major areas and things that are going on. Obviously, we talked about congress.gov. We want to highlight that. They do live concerts, and then usually they'll come up on a webcast that you can watch them later. So there's all sorts of fun stuff there, usually themed around whatever historical month it is or other topical ideas. Some stuff about the National Book Festival, which was last month. And then they have the digital stuff the library is typically found on this bar here. And we're going to explore quite a few of those here in a minute, but I just want to kind of give you an overview of the main page here. Next, they have like a trending area, and these are just hot topics that come up. They have things like they have a little webcast from somebody in the Hispanic division at the Library of Congress, because we're in Latino and Hispanic Heritage Month. And so they have some information about their collections and things that are going on there. Other things, new collections that are out. Jason Reynolds down here, who's been named the National Youth Ambassador for the 3rd year. If you've not checked out his work he's been doing at the library, as well as the books he's written. He's an amazing author for young people, as well as just a great resource for teachers and youth, and so on and so forth. We won't hit all these things. Yeah, if you happen to be going out to the library, this next section is for you. So this actually talks about visiting the physical library in Washington, D.C. So if you get the opportunity to do that for your research, that's great. But if not, that just gives you some information. One thing I do want to note here is this Ask a Librarian area here. And so that actually will get you access to real librarians and curators and archivists at the Library of Congress. And so when all else fails, you can and your students can go in there and ask questions. There's a teacher's area or an educator's area, and we work closely with Dana out there who runs that. And so she's always really good and excited to get questions from teachers. And so don't feel like you're imposing anybody. They really actually do love to dig in and look at things. And if there's things you just can't find, you'd be surprised what they can find because they're so familiar with the collections. And at the very bottom here, I just wanted to point out, they always put up some free to use and reuse. This particular month, they're doing disability awareness, which is a nice topic to explore. But I wanted to point this out just as something that's really strong at the Library of Congress, is that since these are collected and a lot of these things are created for the American people, these are all fair use and can be used in education, and they provide high resolution, good quality photographs and videos and other things, which are a boon for NHD projects, because you don't have to worry about getting bad copies and pixelated copies of things or bad versions of video, or even just knowing that it's a reliable source, that you got it from somewhere that you're not having a copyright violation or anything of that nature. Stuff at the Library of Congress, they're very transparent about where it came from and how to use it. And typically most of the stuff is in the public domain and is fair use for education. I'll show you a little bit more about how you can tell that as we delve into searching, but it's just a nice reminder that most of the stuff on the Library of Congress site is going to be ready to use for these NHD projects. And the last thing I want to point out is just, if you're into any of these social media platforms, follow at the Library of Congress. They always are putting up useful and fun information from their collections and what's happening, the latest and greatest things that they're up to. So I'd like to share that. From there, I'm going to hop out. I'm going to scroll back up. So we're back just at the top of the loc.gov page. You can always tell them your URL where you're at right here. You can always also just click back on this Library of Congress logo. That'll always get you back to this loc.gov main page, because sometimes you get digging in a little far and can't tell where you're at. But like I mentioned, we're going to start by this bar right here. And the first thing I'm going to do is for research is we're going to actually head to the research page. So the interesting thing here is I have a ton of information on this page about research at the library, and most of this is focused around going to DC and doing research. But if you sneak down towards the bottom, you'll see that there's this little section. I don't know why they put it at the bottom of the page on a web page, but it's research on the web. And we're going to explore a couple of these. The one that I really want to point out, because it's fairly new. So if you've worked with the Library of Congress and felt like they didn't have a very good curated collection of things, this is where you want to go. And it's a little varied, but it's not hard to find. It's research guides. And the nice thing, it's also, if you look at the URL, it's just guides.loc.gov. And it will take just a moment for it to load because they have a lot of these. But they finally got all of their research guides all in one place and in a searchable and browsable format. So you'll see that when you pull this up, you'll get this really long list of main topics, and they're librarians out there and curators and archivists. So they're really good at putting things into categories, which sometimes helps and sometimes maybe it doesn't, but it is sort of good. So the first way you can go about this is you'll see right now that it's highlighted that we're looking by subject. So we're just looking generally by subject. And then we're going to hop down and we're going to look at, just as an example, we're going to look at gender and women's studies. I'm just going to show you that when you click on this little plus sign, that now all of the topics that are connected to it are going to pop up. And you'll see that even within that, that's a pretty exhaustive list and lots of things to explore. So that may not be the best thing, but it's a way to launch and kind of do some exploration if you're interested in that topic area a little bit. And it's not surprising because the Library of Congress has the papers from a lot of people who were involved in the suffrage movement and all sorts of other things. So just for our topic, because I thought it was interesting for the theme this year, is to go into the 19th Amendment in the US Constitution, just to see what it looks like when you hop into one of these research guides. And what this is basically the curators and archivists at the library have taken this topic and then given you on this first page an introduction. So they talk about generally what this research guide is about. They'll give you some of the best resources here. And you can click through those and actually see what they are. We're not going to do that right now. We'll check that in a bit. And then you'll see from the side here, there'll be this little bar. And from here, they'll have digital collections. So these are collections of items that were connected to the 19th Amendment. And so as I mentioned, there's a lot of stuff around the suffrage unit. And so if you've studied suffrage or the 19th Amendment, you'll see that a lot of the major players in the suffrage movement have their papers preserved and protected at the Library of Congress and made available online. So you can do some direct research about any of these particular people or them as a collection. And just as a note, the Library of Congress and most museums collect things in collections. And so it's a little different way of thinking about organization, but basically when things are donated to the Library of Congress or they collect them, they come from a singular source, like for example, the papers of Carrie Chapman Catt. So her estate basically donated all of her stuff, all of her papers and things to the Library of Congress to preserve. And the Library of Congress kept them as a collection of items and then cataloged them and then digitized them. And then that's why they're in this particular collection. So right now we're looking at those collections. So we're looking at just basically a grandma's trunk or a trunk of stuff that came from a particular person, organization, or something of that nature. So it's a little different way of looking at it, but it is helpful if you're researching particular people, especially if their papers are preserved at the Library of Congress, because you can see pretty much stuff from their entire life. The other thing that you can look at here is related online resources. So this is taking you off of the Library of Congress site. So obviously the Library of Congress is not going to have everything about everything. And so what the archivists and curators have done is they have vetted other online sources so that you can hop out to other websites and look at this. So you have all sorts of stuff. Some of this at the Library of Congress, some of this is at other places, but it's basically just a launching page for further research. That's all been vetted, so it's pretty trusted, so you don't have to worry about it. Actually, these are all things at the Library of Congress, I'm sorry, in this book. So these are all items that are on the Library of Congress site. So these are all things that are in all those different areas of the Library of Congress. And then here they have the external ones. So this again is just vetted and curated for you. So that gives you some good launching points for some additional research on this topic. And then of course they have some print resources. So if you need to go to the library and pick up some physical books, you know, like we used to in the olden age, they have a bunch of these that are curated around the subject as well. And so it's really a one-stop shop for research if you can, if there's a guide around it. I also just wanted to show real quick, I'm gonna hop back here to the research guides. So again, so if you click on the logo, that gets you back to the lsc.gov main page, but you also see this little, what we call a breadcrumb. So it's basically you're putting little breadcrumbs in as you go. And you'll see that it'll follow you all through. So right now we're under prints and resources under this research guide, which are housed in the main reading room, and then they're under the research guide. So if you click back to here, this will actually get us back to that page where we started in the research guides. And as that launches, we're actually just going to do another thing that was an interesting debate. It's being a little slow, so give me a second. There it goes. And we're going to look up Kansas-Nebraska Act, which might be an interesting topic for somebody, and then give it a search. And you'll see that when you search that way, it's going to then search on for research guides and other materials at the library that are based on that. So there's quite a bit of stuff just on that, but you'll see that they do have a research guide just on that one, coincidentally, since I searched for it ahead of time. But it's set up exactly the same. So there'll be all sorts of resources around that particular topic. So as you can see, there's a couple ways to go about that. The first way, I'll hop back to the research guide. The first way was we went by subject. You can also look by research center, which I find less useful unless you know the structure of the library. And then all guides, you can look at a full list of them. But typically I find it's easiest if you're just browsing things. By subject is a nice way to kind of drill down into things by general categories into more specific categories. And then just to do a general search of the entire collection using keywords or phrases. So that's two ways to see what's been curated in those research guides. And like I said, that's a great place for students to kind of start off. And even if they're just starting their research, because it's going to give them a lot of places to launch, you know, within the library, outside the library, and just a bunch of background information from a trusted source, the curators at the Library of Congress. So that's a great place to start. So we're going to stop there, and I'm going to hop back to the lsc.gov main page. Again, we can just click on the logo here. And now I'm going to go back down to that little bar here. And now I'm going to hop over to digital collections. And we talked about collections at the Library of Congress. And so this is just looking specifically, we're outside of the research guides. Now we're looking just at all of those digital collections or those Grambling trunks of information that were donated from different places. So now we're looking at those. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to, right off the bat, I'm going to go up to this search. And you'll see here that we're searching just in the digital collections, and you can change that. And we'll do that here in a bit. But right now we're just looking at digital collections. I'm actually going to look for diplomacy, because why not? We'll see what they have about diplomacy. And you'll see as we do this, we're going to start seeing keywords popping up. And so just like when you're having the autocomplete in Google, this will do the same thing. So if you're seeing terms in there, you're going to see that these are things that are going to return things for searches. So I'm going to go down, just pick diplomacy from the list, give it a second, and you'll see there's not a whole lot of things specifically about diplomacy, but there's some specific things. This is what I found that I just want to raise awareness of because it was kind of interesting, but it's called Frontline Diplomacy, the Foreign Affairs Oral History Collection of the Association for Diplomatic Studies and Training, which sounds like a mouthful, but basically what this is, let me just give you a structure of what these digital collections look like. So they'll have featured, so they'll talk about some of the highlights from the curators, they'll have some of these things. And these are all just transcripts of interviews with diplomats who serve with the State Department. And so they cover the gamut, I can't remember the years, but it's 20th century mostly. And so we'll look into a little bit further. So this is kind of like just an overview and some of the highlights. So you see they'll have a little write up about what this is, which is kind of good to set your foundation. And then just like before, you'll see up here, now we have collection items, and this will allow you to look at all of the items that are in this collection. This is where you're going to see this particular searching format come up. This is the same way that you can pretty much search all collections at the, as well as the general Library of Congress site. And you'll see that you get these little items on the side called facets, and you can narrow down your search through this. And so obviously most of these are manuscripts because they're things that are written down for interviews. A few web pages. It'll talk about, in this collection, there's one image and one PDF, but most of them are just manuscripts. You can filter these down by location. So if you're looking for diplomatic work in different places in the world, you can look there. And it talks about what it's part of. These are librarians. They have these broken down into all sorts of categories. So if there's a particular person interviews that you're interested in, you can search by it that way. But what I'm really interested here is the subject. And so you'll see here there's 199 items that are about the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that would be an interesting topic for this year, diplomacy and debate. And so there's interviews with the actual diplomats who were part of the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that would be a very interesting way to get an interview for your NHD project, is to go back and look through these papers and do some work together. So just wanted to show that and what a collection looks like, and the sort of little hidden gems that are buried within the Library of Congress if you just do a little searching. So again, these are the digital collections, and this is basically searching somewhat curated digital collections. So we haven't done like a basic search of everything at the library, but we're looking at just at collections. So you'll see that we got that same breadcrumb. I'm going to go ahead and hop back, and this time I'm going to use that where it says Library of Congress to get us back to the main page. And this should be looking familiar at this point. And at this point, I'm going to show you another thing. And this is the teachers page. And so this is helpful for teachers if you're teaching subjects in the classroom, but also they have some really good materials curated around topics that might be interesting for NHD students as well. So this might be something that you steer students towards, or even just get some background information for them, for yourself or for your students as they go through their projects. Again, this is on the landing page. I just want to mention that the Teaching with Primary Sources program is based out of this area. And so you'll see that information about our program, the Teaching with Primary Sources Partner Program, is there. So if you want to learn about that, that is located there. And we have a ton of resources for teachers about how to teach with primary sources in the classroom. A good place to do that is to contact me, or this little area here, it says getting started with primary sources. So if you need a little bit of information about inquiry and primary sources, there's all sorts of great teaching materials, webinars, and other things. And like I said, if you need any help with that, contact me or Kyle. I just want to point out one thing here as we get started with primary sources. If you don't have a good way to do primary source analysis, right here, and it's linked all over the place, but go to this primary source analysis tool. This is a simple 3-step process that we use with preschoolers up to adult learners. And so it works pretty well. It's usually observe, reflect, question. You probably have heard that at some point, but this is kind of the homepage for that. So there's a basic primary source analysis tool that you can download here, but there's also different versions of it for different kinds of media. And what this adds is it adds prompting questions that are specific to different kinds of media. For example, if you're doing a map analysis, it's going to ask you to start looking for things like, a compass and, information about latitude, longitude, and those sorts of things that you're going to find in geographic map type documents. But anyways, I digress. That's just kind of a useful thing I like to point out. I'm going to hop back using the breadcrumb and go back to the teachers page. So again, we're just following that. We kind of went down a little bit. I'm going to go back to teachers. And from here, for our purposes for research, I'm actually just going to hop over to this classroom materials area. And these are things that have been vetted and created and vetted by staff at the Library of Congress, or teachers that have been part of different programs with them, to kind of cover the gamut of things that teachers are going to teach in their classrooms. I really like these primary source sets, and these aren't really, these are just basically sets of primary sources around topics, not lesson plans. So they kind of rely on the teacher to kind of put all the pieces together for teachers, so they can be used in many ways depending on what you're doing. But they've got a nice collection of things that are useful to teachers. So you see I have like Abraham Lincoln. I thought for this year's theme, Alexander Hamilton would be interesting because everybody's interested in Hamilton, obviously, because of the musical. But he was a real person, and his papers are housed at the Library of Congress. And so even just if you're interested in looking at some of the primary sources from the musical, they're here. But as for an NHD topic, there's tons of debate and diplomacy around the Federalist Papers, which he was responsible for a good portion of those. And so you can go through all those correspondence and such as part of this. So on the teachers page, they have a lot of the things that people look for that are really connected to that. Obviously, you can dig in deeper in the general collections in that digital collection that is Hamilton's papers. But this is just a nice kind of launching spot for that. I did want to point out these come with a teacher's guide. And what this does is basically just gives you a ton of context information about the subject. So you can kind of cheat a little bit and get some information about why this is collected and how it connects to the classroom. So those are primary source sets, and they have lots of those that cover a lot of different things. So I'm gonna hop back here. It always takes you to like a general landing page for classroom materials. So I'm gonna hop back, go to the teachers page again, just to do that. Back to classroom materials. And then I want to show you, there's some lesson plans here. Lesson plans are pretty self-explanatory, so I'm going to skip over that. But some topics are, but there's topics and materials there that you can use and borrow. But I did want to show, just as a launching point for research, is the presentations. And what's in here that's helpful. There is some good information about elections and immigration and inaugurations. But the one that's really kind of nice is this U.S. History Primary Source Timeline. So if you just want to browse for topics and things that might spark student interest into a project, they have this broken down into different time periods. And so you can, if there's an interest anywhere here. So let's just go in and look at the Civil War and Reconstruction, which a lot of you might be teaching. And you'll see that they have it broken into different time periods during that time period. So let's just go African-American soldiers during the Civil War. And then you'll see this looks fairly familiar. This has got a little write-up, and then they have the sidebar, which has resources. And then we'll have some documents here that you can look at. And then you can scroll backwards and forwards through the timeline. So it's just kind of a really nice overview, in this case of US history, and a lot of primary sources related to it. So it's a good place just to kind of start some research for students, or just to familiarize yourself with the resources at the Library of Congress connected to US history. Again, those are all on the teachers page. I'll show you one more time. We'll go back to the Library of Congress page. And that was on this bar. That's pretty much where we've been so far. We looked at that researchers, which had the research guides, the digital collections, which have just you can search through the specific collections of things. And then we were just looking at the teachers page that has those classroom materials, and then the primary source sets, the lesson plans, and the presentations that contain that US history timeline. And these are all linked in the document that I'm sharing, so you don't have to remember this because it might take a while to figure that out. So that's the teachers page. I'm looking at my own notes so I don't forget anything here. So from here now we're back on the main page of the Library of Congress. And now we're ready. Now that we've looked at the curated stuff. So the curated stuff isn't going to get you everything. So we're going to take a look at digging in deeper into the entire Library of Congress website, the 60 million things. And the easiest way to do that is up at the top, there's this search bar. And this pretty much will search everything, as it says right here. But you can also, from here, you can search through any of these filters. You can also filter these later, I'll show you. But so if you want to just look at maps, for instance, you can filter it directly from here. But for now, we're just going to stick with everything. And I'm going to look at a search word Panama Canal, because I thought that might be an interesting thing for diplomacy. You'll see again, it'll pop up with words. So we're going to go right there, Panama Canal. So this gives you the search results. And you can see now, since I mentioned we are searching the entire Library of Congress about anything that has the word Panama Canal in it. And you can imagine that there's things that have been created. So you can see right here at the top, this will right off the bat tell you that we're looking at 1 of 25 of about 102,000 items. And so let's just dig in. Let's get through 102,000 items. No, we have some shortcuts here. So it's kind of fun. You can look here and just see things, and the most relevant things will pop up first. And so you'll see there's a ton of photographs that are curated at the Library of Congress or at the Library of Congress, but also there's some posters and things. But let's get a little more specific. So like we did before, you'll see that they have these facets on the side. So right now we're looking at available online. And I want to show you a little trick, because sometimes, because I mentioned that the Library of Congress collects both things that are in public domain, but they also have some things that are still in copyright that you can't necessarily pull up on the website. So what I do usually like to tell people, and you don't always have to do this, but if you go all the way to the bottom, why they put it at the bottom, I don't know. But all the way at the bottom, you'll see this thing. It's called access condition. And what this tells you is that 102,000 of these are available online and available on the webpage that you can see everything. And there's 168 that you can only see if you go to Washington, D.C. And so those are usually under copyright. And so they, because the copyright does not allow them to put those things up on the website in full resolution. So you can see them, they're just not going to be much use for an NHD project unless you plan on going out to DC to get a copy of it. So to filter those out, we can just make that one of our first things that we do and make sure that that's part of, and so you see it refiltered it. So when you click on one of those things, you'll see that we get these little things that are added. So we have available online, which was our original search, and the access condition is now available online. And so with that, that will only show up ones that will be able to access through the website. And then from there, you can see, again, we can, if we just wanted to look at maps, those are available. If we just wanted to look at any of those things, and we'll do that here in a second. But the first thing I want to do is because one of the first things I do with research is always find a secondary source to kind of get a thumbnail sketch of what's going around, an issue around things. So for the Panama Canal, I went into Wikipedia. Shame on me, but it's always a good place to get some foundational information that you can corroborate with primary sources at the Library of Congress. But I learned that generally speaking, if there's activity on the Panama Canal before 1900, it's going to be French, and then after, and it's not absolute, but generally speaking, things happening in the 1800s is going to be French or other countries, and then after that is going to be the United States involvement in that. So if you're looking at one phase or another, or you're researching it, so let's just take a look, and let's filter that down by the 1800s. And then we can even, just to show you, we can filter that down further. We know that a lot of activity, and you can tell here by the amount of information they have on each of these, how much or what was going on or how much material they have. So we're actually going to go down and look at the 1880s. It's going to take just a second. And then you're starting to see that we're getting down to a more reasonable amount of information. So we're not from 102,000 to about 6,000. And so from here, maybe we're interested in looking at a map. And you'll see there is one map. It is this map. And it's there. And then you also see that something that might be handy if we're looking at particular things is to look at, if we go down, they have them filtered by language. And so if you want to look at just at French documents, you can just filter there, or most of these are in English. I just wanted to show you what we actually open up an item. I was going to pull up this panoramic view of the canal map. And these are always fun. These are called bird's eye maps. So these are hand drawn from as if a bird was flying over. And so this shows you the Canal of Panama. So the nice thing is, okay, so I have this image here, and I mentioned that these are available in high resolution format. So you'll see here, if you see this little download thing that says download, and you drop that down, you'll see that there's a bunch of different formats you can download it. That's a dead giveaway that this is in public domain and free to use, in fair use. So perfectly fine to use it in anything you use it for education, including HD projects. And you'll see that it comes in a small JPEG, which is a format, a digital format, a larger JPEG. So a small JPEG would probably be appropriate at that size for like a PowerPoint presentation. The second JPEG probably be good for like putting in a print document. The GIF is usually the little tiny thumbnail, so that's only good if you are going to be putting on a web page to reference it. And then you run into this JPEG 2000 and TIFF, which are their high resolution formats. So the JPEG 2000 is the highest quality, even though it's not the largest file. But the JPEG 2000 is a special format that you can use in programs like Photoshop. So if you want to get the absolute highest quality, and this would be something you'd use if you wanted to take this and then print it out like on a 3x5 poster. And if you have Photoshop, that's easy to do. You just print it out and have it sent down to your print shop or Kinko, or not Kinko's, but a print shop of some kind, and they can print it. If you don't have Photoshop, there's a TIFF, and most computers will open up TIFF files. It's just much larger. So you can get these. I just wanted to show you real quick, especially in maps. It's always fun to see. You can, on this little icon here, will take it full screen eventually. There it goes. And then you'll see that once we have that up, that you get these controls and you can zoom in on these. So you can see that you can get right down in there. And this is helpful with maps because you're probably not going to see all the text and details. Like you probably didn't even notice that there were like little sailing ships coming through here and seeing the brush strokes and things from the artist. So kind of fun. And then, and so those high resolution formats allow you to see those online as well as print those out in a super high resolution. Super handy on big, huge maps and things that you can actually read the text at the bottom, which is always a problem on these things when they scan them in. So great for research and for use in your projects. So that's the deal with that. I'm going to hop over and then talk a little bit about one of the best things about the library card. Oops, click on things you don't need to. Is the bibliographic information or the stuff that the archivists have done at the Library of Congress. So it'll give you a title. And again, this is information, the best that they can collect. And usually they won't put it up unless they know it's a fact. And if they don't, they'll do things like this, where they say when it's created, they'll put a question mark. They'll say, here's our best guess, but we're not 100% sure. But it tells you things like title, who contribute to the library when it was published, their subject headings. So, and these are things librarians do. You know, it's a map, all the librarian speak, the digital IDs where you can link to it. And if you're a librarian, all that makes sense. But the things that are really helpful for research are the stuff on the sidebar off to the side here. And you'll see that if you're researching, so this tells you it's part of transportation and communication, geography, obviously it's a map, American memories, this has something to do with the American story. And it's obviously the online catalog, which there's lots of stuff there. Even more, so you can see what other stuff these people have contributed. So there might be related things that they had, things that happened that year, things that happened that are connected to Panama or the Panama Canal, the country Panama, the country Panama Canal, the language, or all these things. And so there's always launching points for research on those things because these are all hot links. So you can click out to any of those. Other handy things for NHD projects. Rights and access. This is going to tell you the status of its copyright. And like I said, if you can download it, probably you're free and clear to use it. But if you want the long version of that, they have it all spelled out for you there and who to contact if you need it. If for some reason those are going to be published somewhere, you probably should contact the library because sometimes part of the rights to use those, if they're published, they have to collect a fee. But pretty typically for educational projects, you don't have to worry about that. And then also super useful here is citations. So you can grab citations for bibliographic stuff for your NHD project right from there. Obviously, you want to double check it as it mentions here, but generally it's going to give you the information you need there. So super helpful. And then also down at the bottom, it's going to give you things that are related to it, which are, again, helpful for research. So you see there's some other Panama Canal maps here, including this one's kind of fun. These are maps from when the French were trying to make their canal across there. So it's got some construction drawings and elevations of where the canals and locks are going to be. Of course, it's all in French, so you're going to need to translate that, but always a cool thing to look at. And so that is how to search. Let me just go back and I'll talk about that again. So if we go back at the top, we can search back to the Library of Congress. And again, we just did a search here on the top bar, and that's best with keywords. And we should have some time, and I might, Kyle's here, and so I might tap him to talk a little bit about how to find good keywords searching at the library and elsewhere, if he's still around. I also wanted to talk about probably one last thing before we go back and just kind of wrap this up. If we go back to the Library of Congress page, something I really like is digital newspapers. And so if you've not looked into that as part of an NHD project, I would highly recommend at least browsing through this. So if you go, there's a collection of digital newspapers that's a collaboration between the National Humanities and the Library of Congress. It's called Chronicling America. And you can actually just Google Chronicling America, or it's always quick to find it within the digital collection. It's right here. And so they have their own collection. What this is it's like currently they have papers digitized in here from 1777 to 1963. So they're digital newspapers that have been scanned in, and and they're always adding new ones. And you'll see that they actually have a newspaper directory. So if you just want to learn information about what a newspaper and what they're publishing and when they publish it, you can find it there. But for our purposes, these are digitized newspapers, and it's nice because they've did what they call OCR, or digitally recognize the text. So you can search the text in newspapers, and they're working on other ways to like search images in newspapers, which is kind of creative, but that's an aside for right now. But for now, you can just search for phrases and words in newspapers, which is amazing. So you can basically browse through hundreds of years of newspapers just by doing keyword searches, which is great. I love using newspapers in history projects because it allows you to, one, you can step through events in time. So you can have a time machine. You can look at what it was like before an event, during an event, as things unfold and news got out, and then people's reactions, after the event and long after it, even commemorating things, 100 years later in some cases. So it's a really interesting way to kind of look at the public or how things are being reported. So it's kind of interesting. Newspapers are typically considered secondary sources, but when you're looking at how things were viewed at the time, you can use that as a primary source. So so an interesting tool to do that. A couple of things here. We'll do a search here in just a moment, but I wanted to show you a research shortcut. So they have this little thing on the side called recommended topics. And again, that's Chronicling America, recommended topics. And again, this is curated information from the digital newspapers, the Chronicling America collection. So you can kind of get a shortcut into some topics. So the thing I really like to look at here is just go to the subject index. This will give you like basically just a long list of subjects that have been curated. And this does not cover everything, but it does cover quite a bit of stuff. And I'm just going to look at, what did I look at? I think it was League of Nations, which I think was down here somewhere. Give me just a moment. There it is. Because that's an interesting diplomatic organization that I thought might be interesting. So again, these are basically, again, just those research guides, but another way to get to them. But with these, they have a little bit of extra information. Again, you'll notice that they've got like a little breakdown of what the League of Nations was, a primary source to kind of show, something that's from the collections from a newspaper. And then they give you a nice little timeline here. So this again gives you like a little shortcut to what was going on with this. And then what I like here is if you click off to the side, they have search strategies and selected articles. So this is just another way to kind of get some information. So the first thing that's helpful is their search strategies and selected articles. So the archivists would go, okay, when we're searching for League of Nations stuff, here are some keywords that will work great for that. So this works great in Chronicling America. This works great in the Library of Congress search that we did earlier. It works great in Google. So these are things you may not think of, because who would think of Geneva or searching just for league, or a combination of these words using some of the strategies that maybe Kyle will have a second to talk about. And then it has a couple other searches. And then the really cool thing is that they have links directly out to the Chronicling America collection. And so you can see here that we're actually, you'll see that we can go, let's just zoom in on this. You can zoom right in, and as you can see, it's high resolution again, so you can read this pretty well. And then something you can do is you'll see up on the side here, there's this little red box, and that shows you what's on the screen. But there's a tool here. Let's scroll up a little bit. Sorry, maybe it's on a small screen. So a tool here called the Clipper tool. And when you clip that, it's going to basically clip out whatever's in that red box. So if you want to like grab just a piece of that page, because newspapers are weird, they're really huge and they're kind of difficult to use, but you can always use this digital scissors thing. And when you do that, it clips out just that little piece of paper that we were looking at. So if you want to just clip an article, you can do that. And then the nice thing for research here is that it provides a permanent link that goes just to this clipping. So if you're like referencing this in your project, you don't have to reference like the whole newspaper. You can just reference this clip you made. You can also print this. So if you want to make a physical print, or you can download just this image. So if you're doing say you're doing a video project for your NHD project, you can just clip out that high resolution version of the newspaper clipping you want to do, rather than have to pull it into Photoshop and figure it out and clip it down. So it saves a ton of time with that digital work. So So we're going to hand it that way. So that's the clipping tool. And it creates a new tab when it does that. So let's hop back to that paper. Something that's really kind of taking up my whole screen here. Something else you can do is you can just search here what I have in here. I had a Guadalupe Hidalgo, which might be kind of interesting. There's some basic searching tools here, and then also some advanced tools, which I don't think we'll go into, but they're pretty self-explanatory, but allows you to just search with a lot of those things we talked about, locations, newspapers, time ranges, phrases. But I just wanted to show you what a search looks like. So when you search for that, you can go. And then you'll see that we have that. And what happens when you do searches, you'll see that these little pink boxes will float over top of the newspaper. As we go in, they'll still be there. So again, you can zoom in and then you can read the article and see where it's referenced. And then ultimately you can go up and use that little clipper tool to grab it. So there you go. So that's how you use those digital newspaper collections. It's a bit of a skill because you have to remember, you know, have good keywords and remember that there's historic language involved here, because sometimes things aren't called the same thing in newspaper as they were as we've moved forward in history and decide on terms. A good example of that is World War I. It was never called World War I while it was happening. So in the newspapers, World War I is going to get you nothing that's happening during the actual war. It would get you stuff that's happening afterwards. So to do that, you'd have to like do a little research and know like the Great War or the war that, and then filter it by a date range while the war was happening, things of that nature. Just some other kind of research skills. I think that was what I'm going to show for today as far as launching points for research. I'm going to hop back just real quick. I'm going to hop back over here. My presentation. And Kyle, if you're still around, maybe you all go through these, but there's a little bit of information about doing some research. And Kyle being a professor, he really has some good information about some of this researching skills. And I don't know how much time we have left, so if we need to stop this soon, Kayla and Celeste, just let me know and we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, and know too that all of this information is provided on the slideshow. So grab that link again at the beginning of the recording. And there's a bunch of other slides too that give you some ideas for activities using primary sources, literacy activities, visual literacy, information literacy, that kind of thing. So these brain searching terms really is just about brainstorming, just like you would in an English class, but you know, throwing some spins on it. So the first one is just list anything and everything you have to do with the topic, whether it's synonyms, antonyms, time frame, setting, people, relationships, anything. The next one is to describe your topic by making a comparison to help make other kind of connections that you wouldn't otherwise make without that metaphor. You can also draw on your topic, like using new perspectives. What does it do to your topic? So if I look at World War II as an American, what does it look like if I look at World War II as a Japanese individual? So you can really try to get different kind of search terms through perspectives. The RQI, the Right Question Institute's question formulation technique, is a great way to brainstorm questions around a certain topic. So you would get and you can look that up on Google, just Google RQI question formulation technique, and you'll find how they do it. But you get presented with a topic like Abraham Lincoln, and then you can brainstorm questions having to do with that, prioritize the questions, change the questions around. That helps you get a different kind of idea of what your topic's about. The historical language, again, like Keith was talking about, what terms might have changed throughout history. Google also has a search term search that you can actually look through and see how words have changed or how words have appeared in media throughout history. That's kind of fun to do as well. And then keep keywords or phrases together that make sense given your topic. So lump them and clump them together, and try to make connections to other clumps. So if you go to that next slide. and after you've gotten a number of search terms and things that you want to start searching, brainstorming again is another way to just go about it. How does a primary source relate exactly to the NHD theme? What ways does a primary source relate or not to the topic? How might this primary source connect to other sources? What does this primary source leave out? What do you need to still need to strengthen your argument? So use those primary sources as evidence for whatever your argument you're trying to make, so that you can answer those all those questions that are required in the projects, and particularly the 5 W's and H. And this next slide too, you can, these are linked in the presentation, but we've used a system called the annotated resource set before. There's a student and a teacher version link there. And it's just a good Google Doc that allows you to kind of bring in all the information that you need into one place, instead of those really lengthy annotated bibliographies that can sometimes get overwhelming. This is kind of a good way to just bring everything into one Google Doc, so that it's visually appealing and speaks to the things that you need in your topic. The TPS Teachers Network is also a great place for teachers to go to both search and create albums or primary source sets related to the NHD topic. Other research tools too. The Hypothesis is a great one if you want to have your students annotate certain PDFs or online articles. It's a great way to just have them do discussions in a different kind of format, so that they can highlight certain text and actually talk about a certain thing while online. Zotero is a great thing too, that's used for curating research articles. So if you have a bunch of research articles that you need to put into a nice format, Zotero does a great job of shooting out bibliographies, shooting out, organizing everything for you. And Google Sheets is also, if that's the way you like to do it too. And I think that next one, we've went over the Library of Congress Primary Source Analysis tool. It's linked there for you if you need it. There's also the Colorado Department of Ed Primary Source Analysis worksheets that are phenomenal for younger students looking to get into this hefty primary source analysis. And they also have a bunch of primary source sets that are specifically for K-6 classroom. So they're aligned to the standards, and they're built by a phenomenal collaboration of experienced museum educators, teachers, professors, all sorts of folks really trying to get in on how we present primary source analysis in the K-6 classroom. And just lastly, I think is that
We can make the computer work.
yeah, NHD Library of Congress page. I went over that once. Yeah. So NHD does have a Library of Congress page directly on their NHD site. So there's the link for that. And they also have some amazing, Keith talked about the guides. There's one particular for student research. Check that one out, not just for your students, but also for you if you're a first-time LOC searcher. It has a great breakdown of how the search works, how primary sources work, what the difference between primary, secondary, that whole conversation is kind of enveloped in that one guide there.
Yeah, I think it's like 250 pages, so it pretty much covers the gamut, start to finish, of doing a research at the Library of Congress and all the bits and pieces in between. So yeah, it's pretty exhaustive. It's like getting a full course with Celeste and Kayla. Well, not quite as good, but still pretty good. You can't do that.
And that next slide is just a reminder about the TPS Teachers Network. Again, it's a great place to find resources as well as create resources and discuss with other teachers across the nation. There's about 12,000 teachers signed up now. And they all just talk about teaching with primary sources in different kind of ways, whether it's arts or STEM or music or whatever it is, performing arts. There's all sorts of great, really amazing discussions going on in the network.
And there is a particular group that's focused just on NHD, teaching NHD and NHD teachers. And so they always share, resources on what they're doing around that as well. So it's a good resource for teachers.
And Keith had mentioned this Stanford History Education group before with the Lincoln iPhone picture. But they have a phenomenal amount of free resources. They're a TPS consortium member. They have been for a while. So they've created these assessments through Beyond the Bubble and Reading Like a Historian. And then also the civic online reasoning for specific digital literacy type things. So check out their website. You have to sign up for an account, but they don't send you anything, and it's just a really free, simple sign up. And they have, yeah, like I said, they have tons of downloadable kind of plug and play lessons and activities that you can use.
Yeah. Emphasis on this is also free. Yeah. It's a free resource.
And then I think this comes from Sheg. This is kind of a great place to start, in my opinion, with historical thinking. It breaks down historical thinking into sourcing, contextualization, corroboration, and close reading, and those are the real hallmarks of doing historical inquiry. And it gives you some good questions, some what students should be able to do, and some prompts to use for those particular categories. I think it's just a really good way to kind of preface the thinking that goes on with historical inquiry.
Yeah, a good cheat sheet to keep on your desk to kind of prompt these thinking in literacy skills.
And this was just kind of a connection between historical thinking and media literacy. We have all these different terms in all the different subject areas, whether it's historical thinking or media literacy or the scientific method, whatever inquiry method we're going into, they're all really relatable. They sometimes just use different vocabulary. So, with sourcing, we're talking about who created the message. With contextualization, we're talking about understanding different people's view of it, or putting the information into the time. And you can make other connections in other ways, but it's really all the same type of thing that we're just trying to push into one, so that we are understanding that historical inquiry is just like any other inquiry, as long as it's done with some rigor. And then, so web literacy for students, and another literacy that has specific activities and questions for an online literacy activity. And it has to do with reading laterally. And you might have heard that it's from the Stanford History Education group as well. It's this idea of going outside of your website that you're looking at and corroborating that evidence on other websites, so that you can understand not just whether it's true or not, but also the contextualization of it. You can understand who else is talking about it and what their biases are, and it gives you a lot more authority to talk on subjects when you're reading laterally rather than reading vertically, which is what we tend to do when we close read. So the link is there if you want to. It's just one chapter of a online OER book called What Reading Laterally Really Means. And I give this to my undergrad students every semester, and they love to just see the information and know that what they're doing and what they're trying to do is relevant to what their research is, even if they have like 15 tabs open at the same time.
As we all do.
And again, just this last one, civic online reasoning from the Stanford History Education group. They got their own website on the Stanford site, so you can go there. These are specific tools for helping students navigate on and evaluate online information, how it's presented, where it's presented, and how it affects them when it's coming from a different media form than a newspaper or a photograph or something like that, where there's tons of other information on the website or linked in the article and things like that. So the civic online reasoning is a great place to go for some other free curriculum resources.
Yeah, and that pretty much does it for what we're doing here, unless there were some questions from Kayla or Celeste, if we missed something that we should be covering. We yeah, thanks for your time, and our contact information is there. And again, hopefully the link to this presentation or materials at that bit.ly link.
Could you guys share with them how teachers get in touch with you locally? Can they have you come do development at their schools?
Yeah, we can do some of that. Our staff is kind of limited, but yeah, we can reach out, and a lot of times we can do like a Zoom or just provide resources or things of that nature. But if you're interested, what our program really is focused on this point in time is that we do grant programs, which generally like on the level of a school district, sometimes with schools, but with organizations and things. Just to delve into that a little bit, really. We run the Western Regional Center out of our office, and so we provide these grant projects out to the Western United States as one of 3 regions in the country. But since we're local, reach out to us, and if it makes sense for us to do something with you and it fits within our schedule, we can certainly help out. Even if it's as little as just providing a little help with research or filling in some of these gaps or partnering up with people who can help out with things. We work with most of the people locally. Different organizations and cultural people and stuff. So we're certainly a resource to people, but we don't have a ton of time to come out to every school that needs our help. But we certainly reach out digitally, and then we'll see where we can go from there. I'll say.
Thank you guys so much. We appreciate taking your time to record this. We know it's been bizarre, as we say, I keep hearing repeatedly, a couple of years. Looking forward to coming out of this, and thank you again. All right. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.
Thanks.